Alan Buchbach, welcome to Six News.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Firstly, can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Sure. How far back do you want me to go? Like back to high school days, or just
Sure.
recent?
I guess recent. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I did move into this area, Albany Creek, in '93 with the parents when my dad got posted down here. Went to school up at Bald Hills at St Paul's School there. My university alma mater was the University of Queensland at St Lucia, and I suppose I spent most of the last decade and a bit as a geologist. Some of that time as well as a senior engineer and project management, that sort of thing. But mostly geology.
There may be some undecided Dickson voters watching. What is your message to them?
I think the primary message would be not to get pulled into the false narrative that there is only two choices. That there's only the Labor and the LNP. That the good thing about the Australian system is that it's not a two-party system. There is a great deal of diversity in candidates. So, if there's a major party that you align on, say, 6 out of 10 issues on, but then you can have a look around the minor parties and maybe you align with one of the minor parties or independents like myself on 9 out of 10 issues, right? And they're a better fit. And you can still preference the parties, because, when you read about preference deals, a lot of people think that it's the candidate that assigns the preferences for the voter, but that's not how it works, right? Each of us gets to decide for ourselves who we're going to preference, right? So someone could preference me at the top, right? And then, whichever major party appeals to them, they could put ahead of the other down the ticket, right? Just pick the candidates that are best for you in order. And I think that's a great strength of the Australian electoral system.
Well, there's not long left until Australia decides. How confident are you that you will win votes this election?
I think I'll definitely win votes. Whether or not it's enough to win the seat is another question. The betting odds are pretty favourable to the incumbent, but then again, they always are, right? There's a huge amount of advantages that the incumbent has in terms of advertising and so forth. They get a lot more resources behind them. But that said, it's been quite encouraging, right? I've got a lot of support from anyone that I've met and stuff. They're all very enthusiastic. Well done, thanks for having a go. I get plenty of messages every day saying that I've changed their mind and they're willing to support me. So yeah, I'm as confident as anyone can be, I think.
Well, there's quite a few challenges when running as an independent. The first part of my question is, why did you run as an independent, and what have been some of those challenges?
The reason I ran, I'll answer that half of the question first, is that we're actually looking at some pretty dire economic circumstances for Australia, and neither of the two major parties is even willing to talk about the problem, let alone put forward a solution, right? That obviously it would be very unattractive, I think, for the voters if the LNP came forward and said, well, look, we're expecting a recession in 2023 that's going to last for 2 to 10 years, depending on which prediction that you're going to follow. And obviously the mounting government debt's expected to hit $1 trillion. The interest rates are rising, not just around inflation here, but also the United States has proposed 9.6% for the next round of bonds. For Australia to compete with that, our government's going to have to issue them at 10% and $1 trillion at 10%. That's $100 billion a year, right? Just in interest payments, not to mention the capital. So, from that side of things, I couldn't support either major party. I feel that the Labor Party has abandoned the working class and the LNP has abandoned the middle class. So basically, I put myself forward as a candidate who's willing to have a crack. The second part of your question was, what challenges are there for an independent? So right from the get-go, you got to get signatures, right, to get your name on the ballot as a independent. Major parties don't actually have to do that. That's part of the registering as a party process. So then once the party's registered, they get to put a candidate in any electorate where someone's willing to stand, put their hand up and say, I'll run for the party. So from that side of things, you're supposed to have a week, but with Morrison calling the election, sort of the Sunday before Easter, it meant that I had a 4-day period to go and door knock to get the signatures and stuff. So that greatly shrunk my window of opportunity there to get into the race. And obviously then I have to pay all these expenses out of pocket, right? It's a couple of $1,000s to get your name on the ballot, and then obviously any advertising materials, all the rest of it. So, for any independent who like myself, has actually refused funding. I've had offers from a couple of local businesses and people in the area, but I've just said, no, I'm not going to take so much as $1 from anyone. I want to make sure that people can trust me and my integrity, that side of things. So, yeah, definitely some challenges. The lack of resources is the big one.
If you were to win the seat of Dickson and there was a hung parliament in Canberra, which party would you back?
I don't know for certain that it would be a party, because I think there's a lot of Australians who are quite fed up with both parties and are looking for alternatives. It's entirely possible that it could be a very European-style parliament where you have minor parties with a dozen seats each, something like that, forming a sort of a national coalition government. And I'm hopeful that that'll be the opportunity, right? You get a lot of diversity of thought and all the rest of it there. And I think we're all coming from the same places, that we want to see Australia prosper. We want to see the end of the COVID mandates, for instance. We want to see the budget back on track. We want to see people in jobs, all those sorts of things. So I think there's enough that we can align on that that's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I will say that after watching the debate between Morrison and Albanese, that when Albanese just said, Labor Party is not willing to negotiate with anyone, it'll be our platform or none, whatever. I mean, that just right there says that no independent, no minor party could work with Labor there, because, it would just be the Labor ticket, right? So from that side of things, it would be either a national coalition of minor parties, or it would most likely be an LNP government, because I just don't think anyone could work with Labor under the that statement that Albo made the other week.
Yeah, well, there's clear anger around the electorate, especially against the LNP, especially Scott Morrison and the MP Peter Dutton. Have you had much support from the local community?
I have, but I will say that it's not. I don't think it's personal attacks against Dutton. I think a lot of it is, just the situation in general. There's been a lot of nurses and teachers that have, either been put out of work themselves or seen friends lose their jobs over the mandates, and they're not happy. That even if they've gotten jabs themselves and so forth, they're still quite critical of the way those were imposed. So I think that while I've had a lot of people, sort of say, oh yeah, the local guy Dutton, he's got to go. I don't think it's necessarily just about him. I think a lot of it is directed towards the situation in general, that and seeing that they don't really have a plan.
Yeah. Well, we know the LNP is focused on the nation's economy, while Labor draws its attention towards fixing aged care and Medicare. The Greens on climate. An independent like yourself, without actually being in a party, what will you focus on?
So I think the role of an independent is to keep the parties honest, right? That when a bill comes forward, you've got to make sure that it is going to address the concerns that it's been, raised to do. That Frédéric Bastiat, as a French economist and philosopher from a few centuries ago, put forward basically the concept of what's seen and what's unseen. So you can't put forward any bill that's going to create more problems than it solves. And I'd say that when you're trying to get the spending plans right, like Labor wants to fix aged care or what have you, when you've got a prospering economy, then you can pay for all of these plans, but you've got to have the prosperity first. And that's basically what I've put as the basis of my platform, right? That we've got to get this budget fixed. Once the budget's fixed and you've got a surplus going and all the rest of it, then you can look at funding all of these extra programs. But at the moment, we sort of briefly touched on it at the start, whichever party gets in, or parties, if it's a national coalition, they need to cut something like $50 billion every year out of the budget for the next 5. But every party, major and minor, has basically put forward these extra spending plans, right? That they're all promising billions here and billions there. But if you look at the numbers, we've sort of got I think close to 600 billion is the tax revenue for the government, right? And we're expecting a recession, so that number is going to decrease, right? When the economy shrinks during a recession, you get like less tax revenue and such, right? At the same time, with interest rates going up, we're talking $100 billion just in interest payments alone once we're going at 10%. So suddenly, the budget is already sort of running 70 billion a year in deficit. You suddenly increase that deficit for the extra 100 billion in interest rates, 170 billion. Then you decrease tax revenue. You're talking 200 billion plus just in structural deficits, right? This could very quickly balloon the national debt out to the point where we can no longer repay it. And then you have what's called a default. And that's not pretty, right? You can look at Venezuela in recent years or Zimbabwe in a couple of decades ago. It's not pretty. So my main focus would be on getting the economy back in shape. But I know that the Morrison government's pointing it out at the moment. 4% unemployment, all the rest of it. But that's, to quote John Howard from years back, this is 5 minutes of economic sunshine today. We've got Cyclone Tracy on the horizon, right? We've really got to show some responsibility there on the economy. Now, I think education is the other area that I'm focused on, right? So in Queensland, at least, the plan at the moment is basically to bring every student up to a minimum standard, right? But that bar seems to get lower every year. And I think that we need to change the goal, that instead of being to bring everyone to a minimum standard, we try and maximize the outcome for each student. So sure, there's probably some students that can only achieve that minimum standard, but the ones that can do more, we should bring to a higher level, right? And obviously we've got limited time tonight to talk about it, but on my website I do go into a little bit of detail on education.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever considered joining a party to run for a specific seat?
For many years, actually, I was a member of the Liberal Party. When I was at university, it was Young Liberals, and went across to Western Australia in the mining industry and was part of them there. I just feel that they've walked away from their base, right? That they've abandoned the middle class completely, and from that side of things, that's why I ran. I just didn't see that they had a plan to fix anything. And but to answer your question, yeah, I would consider joining a party again. Probably not the LNP at the moment. I think that they've walked away from their party's constitution of limited government and protecting individual rights and freedoms.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question.
Okay.
Would you want to form some kind of, quote, independent party with other independents in the 2025 election to form a majority?
I got to be honest with you, mate. I'm not looking to be a career politician. I see this current 3-year period as being absolutely critical, that either we get the budget back on track or we're going to default probably in 15 to 20 years' time. So I love what I do as a scientist and engineer and so forth, that I really want to get into space exploration. So for myself, I can really see this as being a one-term deal. But that said, I don't see how there'd be an issue in creating a new party. Although that said, there are parties that cross over a lot with myself and other independents. The Liberal Democrats, for instance, the UAP, One Nation, they're all trying to achieve similar goals. I think there's probably room that just like the Liberals and the Nationals formed a coalition government years ago, and they've been increasingly becoming closer and closer to one party. That sort of might occur in the future. That if we do get a national coalition of the minor and freedom candidates, that could form a new party between them, a new coalition party.
Finally, is there any strategies that could help you win votes?
I'm sure that there are. Not being a professional politician, I've basically just been winging it, reaching out to people through social media, as well as, doing the old door knocking stuff, handing out flyers myself, and a couple of my friends, neighbours, family members, the volunteers for my ticket. So, just started getting some, I don't know, it's like I've got a little flyer, with a how to vote card on the back that I've started putting out in letterboxes, notice boards on community places, stuff like that. So, we'll see. I'd like to think that every Australian wants to be an informed voter, and I hope that before they vote, that they'll just Google search myself and each of the other candidates. I've done a lot of work on my website. So hopefully they'll visit dicksonindependent.info and check me out.
Well, we'll leave it there. Alan Buchbach, thanks very much for your time today.
Anytime, Roman. Thanks.